Hi, guys.
Hey,
How are you?
good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming in tonight. My name's Joe Hines, and it's kind of cool doing this with Cossack Fullerton tonight because I'm a grad from there back in 1980, and I have also taught at Cossack Fullerton. There's a really cool lady there named Dr. Irene Lang. Maybe some of you guys know her.
Yes.
And she was the chair of the business marketing department when I was a student there.
And she still is.
And she still is. It just blew my mind when I ran into her. So she was cool enough to give me a few opportunities to be an adjunct teaching marketing research. So that's a little bit about my ancient history.
Cool.
Okay, great. Well, hey, thank you for having me in. Already I share some in common with a lot of you guys. First, the Cossack Fullerton connection. And then my company, 8 Cubed, is also digital marketing. So we build websites. We do a lot of the kind of work I'm talking about tonight. And was also involved in a pretty fun organization when I was an undergrad student. It was called ISAC back in the day. It was a French organization that started, and there was 75 countries ultimately when I was here. Hasn't been on campus for about 20 years, but it was a pretty great organization at the time. Yeah, and very entrepreneurial too. So anyway, tonight I'm sharing with you kind of what my passion has become over the last 3 or 4 years. I kind of grew up at Cossack Fullerton, and then I went out into the corporate world, and I worked for 20 plus years in corporate America. And then I just finally said, gosh, why have I got this terrible headache? Oh yeah, it's because I hate my job. And and I left, and I've been loving life ever since. And kind of what I want to do tonight is help you guys become, if you're just beginning to become aware of this, more informed about it. Or if you already know a little bit, I'd love to kind of become more of a conversation as we go through this thing, and we can trade ideas a little bit too. So the idea with any sales funnel, right? No matter how you erect it, because sales funnel is an old idea, right? How do you go out there and convert all of the unaware masses of people and move them through your marketing process until the time that they're converted into customers, right? And today we can do a lot of this digitally. In fact, what's happened over time is that marketing used to be maybe the last 25 to 30% of the overall sales effort, with most of being done with boots on the ground and actual sales time. But what's happened is, especially as e-commerce has come up, is that we now rely 75 to 80% on marketing and just the last little bit on sales. So the whole thing is kind of inverted. So what I'm going to share with you tonight are some techniques that we can employ in our own businesses to do this. I actually have a meetup group that I started in November of this past year. We're now about 345 members big. And I kind of talk about this and other things at our meetings too. Be happy to share with you more about that later. So, it used to be leads, prospects, customers with traditional sales efforts in the way to bring, use along the way to make customers come around. But now if you look at it, it's become more of a digital effort. Now this model here is something that a lot of you guys are probably familiar with, right? Where, the first, and a lot of times we see this thing, and instead of an inverted pyramid like this, it's more like this, and you move from bottom to top. I like looking at it like this because it really gives you the sense of why is it called a funnel. It's because we pour a whole bunch of people in at the top of this thing, just like a real funnel would be, like if you're pouring oil in your car. And that's the awareness stage, where we're trying to help people understand that they may have a need that they need solved. And as a customer goes through their whole journey and they become more interested and aware in their problem and trying to solve it, they'll go about researching ways to do this. They're going to be thinking about your product as consideration, and they're going to be thinking a whole lot about your competition as well. And so our job at different stages of this funnel is to start with planting the idea that, hey, Mr. Prospect, you've got a problem that needs solving, and then we begin to educate and mature or nurture that prospect into hopefully a sold customer at the end. And we take them through the various stages of the sort of classic marketing pyramid, from awareness and interest to consideration, intent. Evaluation is where they're actually comparing your brand versus 2 or 3 other brands that they had researched and held on to, among all the other ones that they found but threw away or discarded along the way. Ultimately, if we give them the right incentive and the right information, we might actually get to tip the balance in our favor and sell that customer. So, as I said before, it used to be just a little bit marketing and a lot sales, and now it's a lot marketing and just a little sales at the end. When I talk about sales, I mean physical sales, people doing sales kinds of things. So, I kind of want to talk about content, and I like using this idea about coffee. Have you guys ever been to like a cupping activity where you sit down with people who are trained sensory experts, and they'll take beans, coffee beans, from all over the world, and each of these beans, if you have a really highly developed palate, you can say, oh, this has a smoky flavor, or a chocolate flavor, or a cherry flavor, or a walnut, or whatever, things that you and I just kind of don't even think about. But these folks have really, really highly developed talents, and they can find all kinds of different nuances in that. So the point to getting a really great cup of coffee, then, is to have the right blend of beans to get that right flavor. And so what I want to share with you tonight is what are the tactics and the things that we have that help our customers ultimately come to buy with us, because we're mixing beans here, if you understand my analogy, right? So what do we need? We need enough of the right quantity of beans, and we need the right selection and the right origin, the provenance of the right coffee beans, right? Because coffee, if you think about it, it only grows in a real narrow band around the world. Most of the world can't grow coffee, right? It's only kind of above and below the equatorial belt in a really pretty narrow region. It happens to be not just around the belt, but really in mountainous regions where it's grown well. So the right kind of soil conditions, the right sort of sun exposure, the right water, the right arid nature, everything has to go into this thing. So ultimately, this is a cupper, right? This guy is this is like a lazy Susan kind of a table, and he's spinning this thing around, and he's looking at beans, and he's inhaling it, and he's flavoring it a little bit, and he's tasting, and he's saying, do I like this or don't I like this? And our customers, when they're evaluating the content that we're sharing with them, are doing something quite a lot like this. They're looking at what we're putting out there in terms of communication that we're having with them, and they're saying, is this relevant to me? Is this person speaking my language? Are they talking to my needs and interests for information? And are they giving it to me in a way that I can actually understand, retain, hang on to, and respond to? Everybody learns a different way. I mean, this is an educational facility, right? So if you think about it, and this is really important, we learn in a number of different ways. We learn by seeing, or by hearing, or by doing, or some combination of all of those things. Some people love to read a long blog because they're just avid readers. Some people have the attention span of a goldfish and can't stand to read for a long time, and they'd rather just get it in a soundbite off of a Facebook post, right? Some people don't want to read at all, but show me an infographic or show me a YouTube video, and I'm all over that. So the idea is, again, the right beans served in the right way, mixed in the right ways, get you a great cup of coffee or get your product sold. Okay. So what kinds of beans do we have to play with? Well, we've got social media, and so that could include things like your LinkedIn groups, and all of the other things that you've got. You've got hashtags, because if you don't use a hashtag, you're not going to be found. You've got Facebook advertising. You've got all of the different things, Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and all of the myriad things that have come about. And you've got blogging, and blogging now has become something like PR 2.0. And all of the same attributes that we used to talk about with PR, meaning it seems more objective because it's not served up to me as an ad. It's more informational, feels like an article. It doesn't seem to have a vested interest in it. It's more believable, right? People let their guards down. So blogs are a really important way of us telling our stories and educating and entertaining and influencing and keeping things interesting so that people allow your message to seep through. Because overall, aren't we all kind of jaded? Right? I mean, we've all been pitched to and sold and advertised to for so long that if it's an ad, it's kind of like bouncing off Teflon Man, right? Doesn't it kind of feel like that to you? So that's the advantage of a blog. So in your blogs, we should be using things like lead forms, because if you spoke to somebody in the way that reached them, don't you want to give them some kind of a call to action at the end? Hey, if I spoke to you about something that you feel you want some help in or to talk to me more about, let me know who you are. But people often leave that opportunity alone. Your blogs shouldn't have banner ads in them. Your blogs should demonstrate your expertise, right? Because all of a sudden now, you are kind of sampling, in a way, your skill set. It's not just about writing something that's a really great piece of writing. It's you demonstrating what you know and what you do in a way that can be really tangible for people. So they're kind of taking you out for a test drive, right? Or you're kind of like the Costco lady on Saturday morning, right? When they're serving you different things. Your blog becomes that sample of you, right? We'll come back to a lot more of this. Events and networking are another important part of your bean mix, right? So events, to me, well, I go out and I do this kind of activity frequently because, again, this is my opportunity to go out and meet a whole lot of new people. Some of the folks that I meet sometimes need my help, right? So these are things that you can do to promote yourself, and events and networking can be an important part of your social mix. And then when you take into account things like, Eventbrite and Meetup, and you start orchestrating these, or press releases through something like Press Release Jet to promote your activity, you can begin to draw more people into the top of that funnel we were looking at a minute ago. So all of this can be kind of a funnel stuffing activity for you, right? So meetup groups and networking organizations. Do you guys network outside of the incubator?
Yes.
What do you do what do you do to network?
I'm involved in 2 or 3 different groups that, entrepreneurial groups, business groups. I'm trying to think, drawing a blank right now, but there's an electronics group that's been around for a long time that I'm still involved in.
Great. Okay. Like IEEE maybe?
Guys probably do something similar.
Excellent. Okay. So like me personally, I'm involved in different chambers of commerce, and I have a meetup group of my own, and I do a number of other things. And everywhere you go, if you're working and maybe volunteering is another big part of your overall sales funnel, right? Going out and volunteering in what you do and demonstrating your expertise is a great way to reach out, connect with more people, and add them to your funnel too. Right? So anything that you do that's on brand for you, whether it's content and media driven or it's personal activity, can all be part of your sales funnel. But it's about driving people into your business by you initiating the outreach. Right? Industry conferences are another thing. An incentive for contact. Always offer some sort of an incentive for contact. So if, like for instance, what I'll do is for social media posts, and I'll show you some examples in a few minutes, is I do a lot of curated content. Are you familiar with that term, curated content? So how would you describe that?
Curated content would be something you really like or you think would really inform your audience.
Yeah.
You kind of share with other people, share with your audience.
Right. So when I do that on social media, not only am I sharing like a blog or something that I thought was really cool, that also pertains to the problems I think people that I want to do business with might be encountering, but also reflects where my strengths in my business are, so that at the end of that blog, I can also offer a second link to say, hey, if you liked that, or you want more information, or you want help with this, link to my website. That's really the whole game, is to draw people into your website. And when you're blogging, one thing you can do is take your blog and post it on directories, public directories. But your blog should, when you do that, or if it's a newsletter, for instance, you should always offer like maybe the first paragraph with the link that says, if you want to continue reading this, please link here and send them to your website where the blog should really reside. You want them to be on your website because that's your opportunity to sell them through, right? So I wanted to chat with you a little bit about this idea called lifecycle marketing. You're familiar with this term? All customers go through a thing called a customer journey. Is that familiar terrain to you? The journey a customer goes through is already alluded to it a little bit ago. It starts with becoming aware that they have a need or a problem. Right? And then the next step that somebody does is they say, okay, I've got this problem. How am I going to solve for this problem? And they'll start doing research. In today's world, most of our research that we do, don't we Google it all, right? It's all kind of internet-driven. And as they begin to collect information about your brand, my brand, JJ's brand, whatever, it becomes a thing about comparing that information and comparing suppliers. So that's the comparison and the evaluation thing. They select one, ultimately. They're going to make a decision. That selection is the purchase decision. And then the next piece is they're going to go out and work with you as a service provider or buy your product and use it and see how it met the need. And if they were really happy, the next time that need comes around, they're going to go back and buy your service or product again. Ultimately, this will happen so often that they become habitual purchasers. It's brand loyalty, right? This is like the coup de grace, or this is like the pot at the end of the rainbow for most marketers. And they'll start to tell other people through word of mouth, which means that they're going to like your page, or they're going to follow you on Twitter, or they're going to go on Yelp and talk about what a great thing the CSUF Incubator is. People ought to come out here and check it out. Whatever, it's all advocacy. But this is all social media driven too, right? So that becomes the whole cycle. So there's sort of 2 points that I want to make about this. The first point is, you as a marketer, working people through your funnel, you can start with, I start them at awareness, and I'm going to use different techniques to move somebody through each of those stages, because these stages are found everywhere. They're like repetitive in nature, But not only that, but there are lots of people at every stage. So each of these stages is also a target segment. So we can actually focus our content on people in one stage and to be developing content for that group, thinking that not only are we going to affect one person, but we're going to move all sorts of people down through the process. And so we begin to use the different things we've got, white papers or your social media posts or your YouTube videos or whatever you have, to move the whole market through that decision process all the way through to purchase and then repurchase and then advocacy. So it's an overall effort. So here's how it all happens, right? This is your website, right? And notice that you've got your blog on that website. And then the next thing that happens is we're going to attach a bunch of stuff to our site. So think of your website as the body of an octopus, with all of your other content efforts as the ends of the tentacles coming off of that octopus, right? So it looks like that maybe. Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and maybe a newsletter or something. And the idea then, as I mentioned before, is to take your customer, here's your customer, and lead him to your website, where he then ultimately, because you built your site in such a way that it acts as a surrogate sales guy, to conversion, right? Now you've gone from prospect to customer. Well, one of the ways that this is kind of how I've done this in the past, right? I set up a website called Thrive. And because my business focuses on small businesses in the community, I set it up to be the small business owner's manual, right? Like an owner's manual for a car. Like, don't drive this car till you read the manual. So that you can then, and on this website, there are lots of occasions to look at different ideas in marketing for small businesses and learn more about how to manage your own business. But what I'm doing, not only am I offering free information, really the idea about blogging, but I'm also, as I said before, demonstrating my expertise, and because all of my pages have lead forms like this on there, I'm hopefully hearing from some of these customers that I've inspired to reach out to me because they've got a problem that they think I can fix. So then, this thing up here is my Facebook page. That's my YouTube brand channel. This is my Meetup page. That's a newsletter that I do where multiple articles are in it, and each one of them starts on the newsletter. But if you want to finish reading that article, I want you to jump to my website where I'm going to try to convert you into doing business with me, right? So this slide here is meant to be a representation of what I showed you a second ago. It's kind of showing you how I do it. How you guys do it could be something totally different, but this is just what I do, right? So here's the golden rule. The ones with the gold make the rules. Isn't that familiar to you? Right? So what does this mean? I'm beginning to talk to you about SEO, right? And Google's algorithms and why it's so important to conduct your website and manage your website according to what we know Google optimizes on, and how you pull your website up in the rankings. So here's interesting. If you looked at Google, Yahoo, and Bing, right? All of this, as of 2012, was Google. And then this is sort of the rest of the known world, right? So that's why, even though other search engines may be offering or running off of different algorithms, why everybody's focused on Google, because Google is it. That's all that really matters. 81% market share for Google, for instance. Whereas Yahoo and Bing, that's only 19% combined. So in addition to constructing, social media pages and a newsletter and a blog and all of that, an SEO program, which is also something that we do, is really crucial. Are you guys running SEO on your pages right now? Okay. So then you probably know that there's sort of two main pillars to SEO. One is on page, and the other one is inter-websites, between websites, right? So the first thing about on-page is it's all about the language or the keywords that you select. And what we do when we work with our clients and their websites is we first take a look at our clients' competition and their websites to get a sense of, what are the other keywords people are optimizing on, to give us a sense of where does our client need to be. And then we also use things like Keyword Planner and AdWords too that help us understand kind of where we should be optimizing on. And then it's all about making your site enriched, really rich with these keywords and all of the content so that you begin writing as much for Google's algorithms as you are writing for the prospects that you're trying to help. It's just a matter of being very deliberate about word selection, right? Not only is it on the page, but it's also in the titles, it's in the meta tags, it's in the anchors. If I use those terms, are you familiar with meta tags and anchors and these things? Okay, really important. You'd be surprised at how many clients we talk to who 80% of their meta tags are completely empty. Or they've used too many characters, for instance, because there's a limit. Google says we only want 152 characters or something in a meta tag. You have to limit it. If you go too long, it's no good. Just as much as if you don't have anything at all, right? And then the other thing is strategies between websites, because another thing that Google looks at is not only how well does the content on your website seem to match the needs of the people who are searching, but it's also how good or how trusted of a site do you have. And they base that judgment on how many large, meaning highly trafficked websites are linking to you. So then we'll go out there and we'll create relationships with the owners of these large sites so that we can drive links from their sites to our clients' sites. I have a client I just came from there actually, down in Irvine. They do electronic recycling and refurbishing and things like that. And so I've been coaching them on creating relationships in the community down there with schools and other businesses and nonprofit organizations and the like, and on a profit sharing basis. Have these organizations do drives to collect electronics that you guys can then go and pick up more efficiently. And as you're doing that, you're creating working relationships with folks. Then we're coming back once these relationships are structured, and we're saying, hey, how would you like to link back to Green Tree Recycling? That's the name of our client. So there are ways that you can do that in your own relationships too, but it's all really useful. One of the things that I've thought about in the past is with my relationship with Cal State as a adjunct at times and as a student, would there be a way for me to get a link from CSUF site to our site? And I think it would be great for me.
Yeah. Would it be worth it to you?
Let's talk. I'll do one of these every month. So that's the idea. It's links from large, highly trafficked sites back to yours. And then we can also do things like retargeting strategies. Are you familiar with the idea of retargeting? Okay. So you're a person that you're shopping on an e-commerce site, and you load your cart full of stuff, but then you abandon your cart before you execute, before you complete your purchase. Yeah. As soon as you do that, we'll place a cookie on the hard drive, right, of the person who hit that button. And then the next time that they're out on the internet, remember our hound dog a few minutes ago? He's out there smelling for you again, and as soon as he identifies you, he's going to start serving up ads regarding the products that you abandoned in the cart. Because at one time you expressed an interest and you didn't complete the purchase. So now I can start showing you these ads again, all because we identified you as a potential customer. We dropped a cookie on your thing, and now we're going to retarget you because we know that you've had interest in the past through different forms of online advertising.
It's kind of like cyber attacking.
Cyber what?
Attacking?
I don't know if I would use the word.
Would there be like a third party type thing? No other person interacts with.
Well, if we're doing if we're optimizing your site, we can hook it up so that we've got the ability to place the cookie. You can also do this on Facebook, which is really interesting. You can now retarget people when they visit your business page on Facebook. So I don't know that I would call it stalking. It's just an accepted part of internet marketing these days. Yeah. So like I was going to say, you can do this through Facebook too. Now there's something that's really neat here called a custom audience. Are you familiar with the idea of a custom audience? This is really cool. I've got a database of about 800 or so contacts from people that I've met over the last 3 years running this business and doing network meetings with them. And then I serve them my newsletter once a month. Well, you can take that email database that you've got and load it into Facebook. So now when you're running an ad, for instance, you can choose to only serve that ad to the people that are in your network. Now that's okay, right? But then there's this other really cool thing called, let me go back. I'll come back to this. Maybe I can't here. Okay. Create a lookalike audience, right? So this lookalike audience says, neat. Because you've given us 800 or so email addresses, and because Facebook has been collecting demographics from everybody who's ever signed on for a Facebook page, right? They can say, what is the average, quote, profile of the people in your database look like? And then what they can do is they can say, okay, well, to a certain degree of freedom, for instance, but they look at it in terms of, percentage being close or percentage being far away from what that profile looks like. Facebook can construct a lookalike audience for you on a national level. So I said, great, I'm going to give you my 800 or so contacts. And when I said I want it within 2%, very close to what my profile looks like, on a national level, they came up and they said, well, great, here's your list of 4 million people or 4 million Facebook profiles that look like your customer. Then you can, if I was a national company, I could then start serving those 4 million people with Facebook ads that looked like my profile off of my list of 800. That's pretty cool. But I can also say, well, but I'm not a national business. I'm a local business. And so I can say, let's target Anaheim and maybe a radius around Anaheim of about 30 miles. When I did that, my list wasn't 4 million anymore, but it was 45,000 people. That's pretty sweet, right? So now when I boost a post or when I run a liking campaign or when I'm running an ad on Facebook, I can choose to use my Facebook lookalike audience instead of just anybody within that territory. Which, if you think about it, should improve your probability for success. Because this is what your customer is, and these are people who look like your customer. Isn't that just target marketing? Kind of neat, right?
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you think, I don't know how it would happen, but do you think Mark Zuckerberg makes a profit where every time a person signs into Facebook?
Well, I don't know. That the answer to that specific question is probably no. Not every time somebody signs in. But what Facebook has done that the other social media platforms have not done so far is they've significantly restricted your reach. So that if you're not paying for advertising on Facebook anymore, your posts aren't going really anywhere.
Because it's free to sign up.
It's free, sure, and it's free to post.
Yeah.
But no one's seeing your posts unless you're buying ads. Meaning it's only going to a really small group of people. Right? So the answer to the question is, but it's true for all social media. Social media for the people that own and manage the sites is a business platform. For sure it is. That's all it is. It's just another form of media. It's like you and I watch television, for free, right? If it's the 3 major networks or something, right? But not really, right? The only reason that it's free to us is because the advertisers are paying all sorts of money to run ads every couple of 5 minutes or so, whatever it is, right? In a 60-minute program, you get 44 minutes or so of actual content. The rest of it's advertising. It's been underwritten. So what's very interesting is that the only reason that you and I are willing to pay to advertise on Facebook is because there's 1.6 billion people in the world that are on Facebook. But if it wasn't for those 1.6 billion people working for free to provide content to Facebook, right? So not only are we being advertised to, but we're also providing the content. It's like you and I are now in the business of creating I Dream of Jeannie or something. Because every time you go on to post, it's more content that's on there that's attracting other people to come on. You see what I'm saying? You and I are working for free.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. You and I are working for anybody that's on social media is working for free because we're not getting paid for any of the content that we're putting there.
So the makers, developers, the ones getting paid.
Well, the developers are writing the code but that's not what attracts people to the pages. What attracts people to the pages is, like on YouTube, is the stupid cat video, right? The cat playing the piano. But somebody had to create that without getting paid and post it there, right?
Yeah. That was a funny quote, right? Facebook is the biggest media channel, but they don't create their own content.
Yeah.
Uber's the biggest taxi provider, but they don't own any vehicles.
Yeah. Airbnb is the biggest hotel, but they don't have any rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool business model.
It's great. So what we're trying to talk about tonight is how do we take that and use it for our own purposes, meaning to grow our businesses, right? That's the idea. So we're basically trying to co-opt the system. Subversive. Okay, so we talked about retargeting. We've talked about lookalike audiences, custom audiences. If you've got a site, are you doing Google Analytics on your site? And are you paying attention to the content in your Google Analytics? And are you responding and managing by it? Okay, that's critical. You'd be surprised at the number of customers that we have that say, yeah, I've got Google Analytics. I've never seen it before, but I know somebody put it on my site a long time ago. And, oh, by the way, I'm really not happy with the way my site's performing. You think there's a connection? For certain, right? So it's all about that. I want to chat with you a little bit quickly about bounce rates, right? The idea, right? Okay, so if somebody gets to your website, and do you know what a bounce rate is to begin with? We all should, right? It's when somebody comes to your page and they throw up and leave immediately, right? That's a bounce rate. Well, if you look at it by industry, bounce rates for the retail industry tend to be around 20 to 40%. A landing page is super high. It's 70 to 90% bounce rate. If you're looking at a portal, it's 10 to 30. Service sites are 10 to 30% bounce. Content websites like Thrive that I showed you has a bounce rate of between 40 and 60%. And lead gen sites are between 30 to 50. So it's great to know this information because then you say, gee, what business model am I closest into? And you can take that statistic and compare what you're seeing on analytics and saying, are you kind of sort of in that area or are you way above or way below? And what does that mean, right? Data all by itself doesn't ever tell us anything. You guys all took finance at some point or another if you're business majors, right? We all learned how to do the key ratios. But those key ratios by themselves, if you're looking at your company, but instead of looking at an industry, what does that ratio mean in isolation? Nothing, right? It's just a statistic.
You know that lead gen should have a higher bounce rate because that's a do or die page. You're either going to do what you need to do, and then you'll land on the second page, or you're going to die and bail.
Yeah.
So it should have more of an 80 to 90% bounce rate.
Interesting, though, it's 30 to 50 was what that was reported here. Yeah. So.
I was just about to ask the same thing. Are those bounce rates accurate?
Yeah, these are. They are accurate. I don't forget what survey report I pulled this from, but yeah, it is. Yeah. Email campaigns are another really critical thing. Are you guys doing anything in email marketing? What do you guys do?
For conversions.
Okay, great. So once a month, every couple of weeks?
Every 3 to 5 days.
Wow, excellent. Okay, good. Yeah, my business, I set it up like on a bi-monthly basis, only because what I'm sending out is kind of longer content-related stuff. Now, what do your emails consist of? What do you?
For the law firm, as soon as they sign up for a newsletter, I'll download an ebook.
Yeah.
Then so that's the whole email. Are you looking for this? 3 days later, 5 days later.
There you go.
8 days later.
Yeah, that's what that should look like.
It's about 60 days.
Yeah, good. And what kinds of conversions do you get from that?
I don't even follow it.
You don't follow it?
I know that part of it, but I don't know the conversion rate.
Okay.
And do the sales on
What is a conversion in your case? Would that be somebody signing up with your firm? Is it a real conversion, right?
it. Right, that would be considered a conversion.
And it really depends also on what your objectives are, to your point, right?
Yeah.
Conversions can be anything from, did I get them to get to my website? That's one kind of a conversion, right? Or did they do business with me? That's the ultimate conversion, and all the steps in between, too. A lot of times it's a series of dominoes that all have to fall before you get to ring the register, right? Yeah. So, click rates by size. And this study actually looked at companies of a particular size, and it said, what are the open rates on average and what are the click rates on average? Open rates, when we do things, we're actually in about that same kind of 30-plus category. With click rates, again, hovering in that same range. But what's interesting here is that they're all pretty well clustered together, right? I would expect maybe a company that's 1 to 10 or a company that's 201 plus to have more spread between them, and they kind of don't, you know? It is all kind of centered around that 32 to 35% range. I thought that was interesting. But just again, another more statistics for you guys to evaluate your own results and experience. Key point to this is really understanding who your buyer persona is, right? The buyer persona is what is the profile of your customer. Understanding your customer really then lets you understand where should you be on a social media aspect, where should you be focusing your attention in your posts. I sometimes think about it in terms of like the worst maybe blind date that you were ever on. Have you ever done that, you guys? Been on a blind date or something? Or try to have a conversation of any kind of significance with somebody that you don't know. That's hard, right? And it's awkward. You don't get very far. And trying to market to somebody that you don't know is equally impossible, right? Because we don't know what kind of information to offer. We don't really know what kinds of problems that they're having, or what they're up against, or how to appeal to them, or even the kind of content that we should be serving, or even where to put our content, right? And it's kind of true. So if you looked at Facebook, just the sheer size of it, it's a totally mass market kind of a site. Whereas a thing like Instagram that's so highly visual products do really well on Instagram. But also, there's a whole sense of the skew on gender, right? Instagram tends to be much more female in visitors than it is male. LinkedIn clearly for business to business, and that's kind of the only option that we've got. Usually when I'm doing social media for a client who's in B2B, I'll take Facebook and LinkedIn together because Facebook is everybody, and there are so many thousands of business pages there too that it kind of serves all purposes. If you've got a really this is a lot like we used to talk about in terms of traditional media too. If you've got a very visual product, maybe you're really interested in television as well, right? Well, it's the same thing with YouTube. And if you've got a product that needs an explanation to say, how does this work, or what does this look like, or what are the visual advantages, you want something like an Instagram or a Pinterest or a YouTube in your sport. The idea here about knowing where she hangs out, just where do your customers spend their time online, right? So this actually took a look at, over the periods 2012 to 2014, percentages by year, percentages of people who are actually on those sites. So what we saw here was that, Facebook had, 13 and 14, about 71% of online adults, versus LinkedIn, a much smaller percentage, but that's because it's such a niche area. It's only B2B. Pinterest, again, has been climbing over the last few years, but it's still pretty small. Instagram is small, and Twitter, they're all kind of equally sized, with the exception of Facebook for those 3 years running. I haven't got any more current data, but this kind of shows you just the scale. The other thing was to take a look at demographics and then taking a look at social media sites and to say, okay, for instance, users of Instagram tend to be, more black and non-Hispanic. That's 34% versus white non-Hispanic that are 12. And the age group of, the biggest cluster age-wise is 18 to 29. And then income-wise, it's sort of the lower end. I mean, you can't call it 75,000 lower end of the income scale, but you'll notice that you don't have the top tier. So it's an indication of kind of who's there, right? And if you were to if you look at Pinterest, all of a sudden, you've got a much heavier proportion of women that are there, 33%. And if you look at by age, it's 18 to about 50 in that category. If you look at college education, it's a more educated market than the Instagram market is, 25% versus 15%. So again, understanding buyer persona and who your customer is from a demographics thing, and then understanding what the various sites and how they line up, helps us. It's like media planning was back in the day with traditional media. It's the same kind of thinking you want to bring to here. who's reading the magazine or who's going to this internet page, right? A little bit more on the topic of blogs. We've been talking a lot about, moving customers through a procession here. But every concept that you have should have multiple lives, right? Because it's the goal. The idea. The goal is the idea, as much as the execution. So let's say that and we talked about the fact that people learn by reading, by doing, by seeing, by listening, combination of things. But some people have preferences one over the other. So let's say that your key idea in your business is weight loss, right? Well, you can serve up a white paper that says, if you have a certain level of diet and this kind of activity level, etc., and write a whole report about how people can lose weight. Or you can take that same idea and throw up an Instagram. But it shouldn't be an either-or kind of a thing. You really want to tell that same weight loss idea story as many ways as you can so that you're capturing a much bigger group of people, right? It's telling the story lots of times in lots of ways. This idea here with content mapping, again, is going back to that buyer persona. Who is your customer from a demographic perspective? And then also thinking about where they are in their purchase decision cycle, right? That customer journey. So if you've got, you've got a kind of a person here, and you've got each of the phases that customer is going to go through. Then you've got, in need recognition, the tone of the communication should be, the needs are just now becoming known, right? So you're kind of revealing to them that maybe they've got an opportunity. The content type would be interruptive, right? You're kind of forcing a new idea on somebody. The tone of that should be you're really trying to agitate that pain point. It's like the old direct response marketing thing, right? You introduce a pain point and you really agitate it, you work that point, and then you reveal the solution later. But it's really making them feel the pain that's the key part of that opportunity. And then, so examples could be industry news and trends and issues and things like that you could speak to. So this is all addressing need recognition, but what you notice is that at each stage of the buyer's journey or the customer's journey, you want to be able to specify each of these things as you go along. So what's really interesting in content marketing in particular, where we're combining so many different types of media to move people through that funnel, is that in content marketing, we're using all of them to our advantage. But companies that are doing this well have almost re-identified themselves as not so much a beverage company, like Red Bull, for instance. They consider themselves to be a beverage company. A publishing company, not a beverage company anymore. And the reason that they've re-identified themselves that way is because they saw that content marketing and using social media and this sort of organized approach had such a monumentally large impact on their sales that they said, it's not about the beverages that we make, it's about how we tell our stories. So companies are actually constructing departments of people who function like a magazine or a media company instead. And they're creating editorial calendars, and they're setting up deadlines for content, and they're getting very, very, very detailed about how they're constructing and synergizing all this stuff. It's becoming an all-inclusive effort to make this stuff happen. But it's really fascinating because it's so effective. So, if you're going to be blogging and thinking about if you're going to write a blog, what are the real effective things to consider? Well, purpose for one, right? Why are you writing? And your purpose needs to be, you want to solve a problem for somebody. You want to educate those people who are reading on the different options that they have and how they should solve those problems. You're informing and you're entertaining. Remember, this is like publishing now. This is like running a media company. These are the same kinds of considerations that you take when you're running a media company. The tone for each of these things, if you remember back to here, there's a different tone for each of the stages that are in the customer journey. So in here too, what is the purpose of your blog? Are you trying to agitate and create awareness of a problem If so, the tone needs to probably be somewhat urgent and interruptive and, very direct response kind of approach. The personality, who, right? This is why I said it's really, really hard to have a conversation with somebody that you don't know. And it's really, really hard to write them, quote, a letter if you don't know them. And think about this blog that you're writing like a letter, meaning it should be infused with your personality and your expertise and a knowledge of the person that you're writing to and the kinds of things that they think about and the way they go about handling problems and researching, etc. So, because if it's just bland, no one's going to be reading it, right? So the point is to engage them early and get them to read your whole content, and they will when it feels like there's a relationship there, and there can only be a relationship there when you understand the buyer's personality, the persona. Consistency is super important, not only in blogging, but in everything, in social media, in sending a newsletter out, in blogging, in everything, right? Because when you begin to gain people's trust, and they're relying on your content to help them make decisions and solve problems, they're expecting to receive this thing in their email, right? That's the expectation thing that you set up. Every few days, they're getting another email from you, right? Well, so that consistency allows the formation of trust in a relationship. You can create opportunities for community and feedback and engagement. Right? I always like to end the blog with, if you got any feedback, and give them a fill-in form at the bottom of that page, and then they can comment. And then when they do, take a chance to respond back and really nurture. Again, activation, like I showed you the lead forms on my pages. Right? So make sure that you build that into your work. That, in a nutshell, is what I know about content.